when Arthur got his car, my son would take it for a ride around the block, and when it came back, he would go out and dust off the tires because nothing bad could happen to this car, not even the slightest bit of dirt. What I find so powerful about this story is here we are 2,000 years later reading this, and the same attitudes that made up humanity then make up the same in our own minds today. When I left the Capuchin Franciscan Friars, my biggest concern, worry, anxiety, and fear was how was I going to provide for myself? How was I going to eat? See, when you're in a friary, everything is sort of provided for you, so there's very little to worry about. But once all that leaves, there is this amazing jolt to your system that takes place, and you realize that the amount of money that they gave you when you left wasn't going to last very long. And so you needed to sort of become very keenly aware of getting a job, moving as quickly as you can, and trying to make sure that you can provide. Now, that all gets tripled or quadrupled in anxiety, stress, and fear when you get married. And it grows 1,000-fold once you have children, because now all of a sudden you have this responsibility to be providing. And so there is this inherent shock to our systems as we get older, that we believe that what is most important is having security. And there is, to some extent, truth to that. And notice here, Jesus isn't denying any of that. He's not saying that the man is wrong in celebrating the good harvest. He's not saying that the man is wrong in that this is now available to him and perhaps he can settle down a little bit. But the two things that are wrong, that are our problem here, which you really sort of need to read into, is first of all, if you take grain and you put grain in a big storage bin and barn, the grain goes bad. The grain actually rots. So he has this tremendous harvest, and he wants to preserve the harvest, and so he puts it all in this huge bin. But the reality is, his belief that this will be safe and will last him forever is erroneous. The audience, not us, because I could dare say I could go to each of your apartments and homes, and you do not have a storage bin outside full of grain. But for Jesus' audience, they would have heard this and they would have said to himself, this guy's foolish. He's never going to be able to preserve the grain, and yet the man sees his value in the grain. Doesn't see it in, I should take the grain, sell the grain, and keep the money and preserve that. He thinks the grain itself is what is going to be his sustenance and will last him forever. And every single person in the audience listening to Jesus knows instinctively that this guy knows nothing about farming, and he knows nothing about storage and of storage of a harvest, and that he's running in the wrong direction. And what he hopes to accomplish is all going to fall apart anyway. The other thing that Jesus does not directly mention, but sort of ties it in at the end, that our satisfaction, our joy, our completeness comes from putting ourselves and doing things that God feels is important. That is Jesus' key to us, that nowhere in here does this man believe in any way, shape, or form that this amazing grace and gift of this abundance harvest that he has, that is so spectacular in his life that he's willing to make a significant investment in tearing down and rebuilding new storage bins, as erroneous as that is, but it is so significant in the midst of all of his preparations and everything that he now sees and all the joy that he has now because of what he possesses. Nowhere in here does the man talk about giving anything to anyone in need. And I'm sorry, it's a lot like us. We have moments of struggle and difficulty and challenges. Those moments leave an imprint on our hearts and our souls emotionally. And because of that, when things get better, we all instinctively try to self-preserve. We do. The beauty of it is that this is part of humanity, because 2,000 years ago, they were doing the same thing we're doing now. So there's something to that. Jesus is not saying that the man is wrong, but he is saying that, one, the way he's going about preserving this enormous amount of a harvest in his life is wrong. And also Jesus is pointing out that this man is not seeking after the things that God would want to seek to. The other thing I just want to point out, and this is the next cocktail party you're at, bring this up. No one there will know this. No one. This is the only parable where God actually speaks to a person in the parable. Bring that up over a glass of wine. That'll really stun everyone. But it really is true. It is the only time in any of Jesus's parables where God encounters a person and says, the Father says, you're a fool. Because this very night, it's all going to be taken away. Your life is demanded of you. So God's coming and claiming his life and taking him to himself, and basically now says, you thought your value was all about what you owned, and what is it now that you're going to do now that that is all taken away and all stripped away from you? I was sharing with some of the friends that we had over this weekend, spending time with us, friends, family. And I was talking about how over the last year and a half, I might have shared it with some of you, I have never encountered as much pain in the world as I have, I would say, over the last 18 months. Talking to ordinary people, just like us. And it's not, I'm sick and I've been diagnosed. Those were pretty common. You know, that's been part of my entire ministry, and I would dare say anyone in a role of minister or pastor or whatever would be hearing those things, because people come to you and asking for prayers, and I always find that comical, because the very fact that they're asking me for prayer, do they not think that God's listening to the conversation and God already got it? But anyway, it's fine. I do my job and I pray for them. I do. But it is kind of intriguing to me that they think that somehow I have a special hookup. Anyway, so the point, though, is that in those moments and those experiences, that's pretty common. People struggling with financial challenges, relational activity, things in marriages are all pretty common. What I'm talking about now is an experience that I'm processing of people's deepest and most challenging selves. It's not anxiety. It's not depression. It's something much more deep and profound. And sometimes it doesn't have a starting point. It doesn't have a reason. And so they come and they talk to you, and when you listen to them, it's really easy, and I do this a lot. People come and they say that they're feeling whatever, and one of the very first things I do, instead of telling them, go see a therapist, and the last thing I talk about really at that moment in time is God, because the last thing you want anyone who's going through a difficult time to think that somehow God has an issue with them. So I try to leave God. But I start with the human, right? Why don't you go see a doctor first? Because I have found in all of my years that sometimes things like vitamin B deficiencies, vitamin D, it can be something related to your thyroid. There are a number of things that can cause these feelings that they have that they can't put a finger on. And so sometimes it is medical, and you need to, so we start there. But for a lot of these folks, even after they go and see a doctor and they come back and they had all the blood work done, they're still feeling this angst. And I guess that's the word that I've come down on, angst. It's not depression, it's not anxiety, it's just this heaviness that sits upon who and what they are. And in talking to them and trying to identify what that is, they really cannot speak to what is the cause of it. Brings me back to the rosebush story that I started on. I'm wondering whether we in our society believe that a new pair of shoes on top of 70 or 100 pair we already own, a new shirt, a new car, a new house in a different neighborhood, have we become so superficial that we believe those things attribute to us our value and gives us permission to be happy? Because there is this euphoria that comes with buying a new car. There is. When you buy that new pair of shoes, you definitely, right? If you could, you'd wear them to bed, right? Because you just absolutely want to have that experience of wearing those new shoes. And look, I get it. And I'm not saying we're not entitled or we should not. I'm not. But I am saying that I think we live in a culture where we have been duped in a way of thinking that says that what we get from the outside gives us our value and our purpose, and not ever considering for a moment the work we need to do on the inside, where really our growth and our nurturing truly does come from. And I think that is what Jesus is pointing out here. This man believed that when he made the biggest hit of a harvest, that only then would he, what does he say? He says 4 things. Now as for you, talking to himself, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, and be merry. He was only allowed to give himself permission to do those things when he reached a pinnacle of which he thought that he was deserving, that he could give himself those things. And that, I think, is something that even you and I do today. We don't rest, eat, drink, or be merry because we're too overcome and overwhelmed in this journey trying to get to a place where we think, because we have been taught to think, that we can be and do all of those things because we've accomplished a certain goal and a certain plateau. And I just find it hysterical that Jesus' audience 2,000 years ago believes the same thing we believe today. And you have to ask yourself, where does that come from? How does that get instilled in us? How is it possible that a parable that is 2,000 years old applies point for point with where and who we are today as it did back then? What does it say about humanity? What does it say about the influence of culture on us? And then ultimately, what is it that Jesus is challenging us to? But you are not rich in what matters to God. And that's the rosebush food being fed to the roots, is what our challenge is. It is the world, and the world says certain things, and we have a choice to believe and think like that or not. Most of us don't pay attention to it. Why? It's that whole hamster on the wheel thing. We just keep moving, and we think that we're going to get somewhere, and then we hope that we get somewhere. But in the end, we're still a hamster on the spinning wheel inside the cage. Where what Jesus talks about is asking us to critically think about what it is that we believe and direct our entire life and energy towards. Because in the end, even when we accomplish or get all of those things that we get, we end up in a situation where perhaps we're not able to enjoy them. A friend during the week was talking to me, really, really honestly, wants to become partner of this law firm that he's part of. Really honestly, it's like a desire for him. Don't get me wrong, he's getting paid very well now and has really good bonuses. But somehow in his head, because he's in a culture that believes and thinks and attributes to the term partner, which, by the way, the term partner comes with more work, more responsibility, and less time with your family. He's admitted that. Those three things definitely come with the term partner, which he doesn't have to aspire to now as principal or whatever they call. So with that, with the title comes all this extra work. He has children. He doesn't know how much time he would have with the children, but the title of partner makes all the difference. And so the conversation we had was, is that really what you want? Like, if you're already getting an amazing salary and you're getting really good bonuses and your people like you and you have a good work environment and you're stable, what is the drive to become this next thing of which you lose more of yourself and more of the things that you are finding value in, like spending time with your family? But tell me if we don't all think like this, you know? Look, I was spoiled. I came out of the Capuchin Franciscan Friars where we had no titles. We had no responsibilities. And immediately, my first job, I became a chief executive officer. So I didn't go through any rungs. I just started there. So I never had the experience of the desire to acquire something. But I got to tell you, if you look at my background now and you look at the list of things I am with companies and principals and managing partners and chancellor of a university, like, what does it do for me at the end of the day? Nothing. What does it bring to me? More responsibility, more things you have to do, and more of a challenge to balance family and a relationship with God and friends, which is more important to me than the titles. But with the titles come responsibility. And it intrigues me that this man now sees himself as rich, even though the grain is going to rot and not be usable within a certain period of time. And he's not even paying attention to that. And I wonder if that's the way it is with us. We don't realize that getting to the next thing doesn't necessarily secure for us everything we want. What we get actually begins rotting away the minute we get it. And Jesus is challenging our thinking and our perceptions and what we're buying into. He just is. And for 2,000 years, every generation has heard this story, and they might want to try and tweak it one way or the other, or, focus on the word fool, or whatever you want to do. No, Jesus is basically saying, you have to consider, what is it that you believe? What are you valuing? And is it the same thing that God values? Didn't we talk about this last week or the week before about the fact that our value is seen in our productivity? All of this is woven together, and it tells me something about humanity. We are immediately flawed, and we live in a society that presents a flawed view of what all of this means. You remember Bruce Baker. Bruce Baker was a pastor who used to come and help us when I first got started here 24 years ago. The minute Bruce finished his ministry, what did Bruce do? He had a church, was pastor of a church for a very long time. After that, what did Bruce do? He bought this small cabin in the middle of Pennsylvania with like bear on one side and deer on the other. And that's where he found himself wanting to go, because everything else at that point just didn't matter. He just wanted time with his family, just wanted time with God, and he liked to garden. You know? For us today, we have to ask, are we doing things that God would want us to do? And the real easy answer to that is, does our life represent that of Jesus? Are we adhering to the values and the example that Jesus sets forth? This isn't hard. We already have a living example of the characteristics and of what is most important to God in the person of Jesus. How much does our life reflect that of Jesus? And if it doesn't, then we're not doing and directing and focusing our energy on things that God would want us to do, but instead we're following the herd. We're stuck in the hamster wheel, and we really should consider, when are we going to give ourselves permission now to be merry? God bless you.